Hello everyone, it's Mr. Wolfe here, and in this video I'm going to be going over video scenario number 1. So this is asking the question, what happens when we take a negative plastic strip and it touches a neutral pithball? Right? Are they going to attract, repel, or really just do nothing? So let's talk about our objects beforehand. Right? So our our plastic strip is an insulator, which means electrons can't move freely, and I've shown that by having my excess electrons right here all together in one spot. So why do I have extra electrons here? Well, it tells us in our scenario that this has a charge of -6, which means that there are 6 extra electrons compared to protons in my object. So I have 10 protons and 16 electrons, and those 6 excess electrons are clumped up in one place. All right, so then we have our neutral pithball, and this is a conductor, which means that electrons can move freely. Right? It's also neutral, which means that I have the exact same amount of protons as electrons, so 10 protons, 10 electrons in my model. And now let's see what happens when my objects touch. And so we want to ask the question, what do electrons want to do? And electrons, these excess electrons, these extra electrons are repelled from one another, and all of a sudden they have almost like a road to get away as far as possible from one another. So electrons are going to jump over to the pithball because, again, they're repelled from these other excess electrons in my object here. Right? Now, since these objects are about the same size, there is about the same amount of excess electrons here, 3, as there are the same amount of excess electrons here, 3. So even though these electrons are repelled from each other and these extra electrons are repelled from each other, there's about an equal amount, so they really don't want to move anymore. All right. So at the end, my insulator, which is my plastic strip, it's still negative, notice. All right? And since it's an insulator, that charge is still kind of localized in one area. Now for the pithball, when the electrons jump over, remember, electrons are still repelled from one another, and they want to get as far from each other as possible. And since this is a conductor, electrons can move freely. That's exactly what they're going to do. All right, so they're going to move as far away from each other as possible. So I'm going to spread them out. And since these atoms in our model have an extra electron, we really can't call them neutral. So I'm going to erase the circle here for my atoms that have these excess electrons. All right. And since my object now has 13 electrons and 10 protons, it has 3 excess electrons. The pithball is also negative. Right? Notice it's the same amount of electrons here. There's 10 protons and 13 electrons. 3 extra electrons here, 3 extra electrons here. So a charge of -3, a charge of -3. Now, if both of my objects are negative, right, likes repel, so at this point, if I brought these objects near each other, they would want to repel away from each other.